The first 24 hours of World War III. 4:16 a.m. A single unauthorized radar return looms across 3 separate screens at once. It is too fast, too clean, too deliberate. In the same second, the night air feels heavy, like pressure before a storm. No sirens yet, no alerts yet. Just a subtle click of relays as hardened systems wake up. Somewhere, deep underground, a duty officer's throat tightens as the word anomaly turns into incoming. And outside those bunkers, billions keep sleeping, wrapped in normal life like a blanket. Streetlights glow. Refrigerators hum. A late-night driver rolls through green lights. The world still looks safe. Stay with us to the end, because the first 24 hours are not a battle. They are a chain reaction. In that instant, the old world does not collapse loudly. It collapses quietly, then all at once. In a coastal command room, the catalyst is not a speech or a treaty. It is a packet. A ghost signal inserted into military networks with the patience of a surgeon. The warning feed shows launches that are not real, then hides launches that are. A defensive algorithm tries to reconcile contradictions. It cannot. The system does what it is designed to do under ambiguity. It escalates the alert posture automatically, one rung at a time, without human permission. Operators talk fast, but their words feel slow in their mouths. Someone says, false positive. Someone else says, we can't assume that. A commander's hand hovers over a phone that rings with no caller ID. Across the ocean, a different room sees the same confusion. They do not trust the other side's confusion. They trust patterns, and patterns look like preparation. That is how the first minute becomes a threat. At 4:23 a.m., secure channels light up with clipped phrases and half-finished orders. Confirmed status. Authenticate chain. Raise readiness. The language is clinical because panic wastes time. Panic also spreads. A civilian airliner crosses a waypoint, ignorant of the invisible shift beneath it. Pilots hear nothing except static spikes that vanish as quickly as they arrive. In the cabin, a child sleeps with headphones on, untouched by history. By 4:30 a.m., the first public clue is not a headline. It is a glitch. Phones hang for a second, then reconnect. Smart speakers pause mid-sentence. A streaming video drops to low resolution and never recovers. The information gap is the first weapon. Governments know something is wrong, but cannot prove what it is. Civilians sense something is odd, but cannot name it. The space between those truths fills with rumors. At 4:41 a.m., the second catalyst hits. It is physical this time. A high-altitude burst flashes like a camera in the upper atmosphere. No one on the ground sees a mushroom cloud. They see a momentary dawn, then darkness. The electromagnetic pulse is not dramatic in movies. It is quiet. It is lights going out in synchronized waves. It is the soft death of circuits, the sudden stillness of elevators, the blank stare of traffic signals. Power grids do not fail like a single switch. They fail like a body losing blood pressure. SCADA terminals freeze mid-readout. Control rooms see their own sensors lie. Operators chase phantom loads until the screens go black. At 4:46 a.m., city blocks lose electricity in patches. At 4:49 a.m., the patches connect. At 4:52 a.m., whole regions slide into silence. The only things still shining are battery LEDs and distant stars. You can feel the psychological shift immediately, even without a single explosion. People step onto balconies and listen. They expect noise, but the absence of noise is worse. Silence means the system is gone. Inside hardened facilities, generators start and stabilize. Outside, generators do not start because fuel pumps are locked by dead electronics. Diesel exists underground, but no one can buy it without a working register. At 5:05 a.m., emergency services switch to backup radio nets. Dispatchers speak into microphones and hear only partial responses. Repeaters on towers run out of battery. The network shrinks like a burning rope. The first casualties are not from missiles. They are from ordinary dependency. Hospital ventilators flick to battery mode. Dialysis machines stop. Refrigerated medications warm. Every minute turns a modern building into a trap. At 5:18 a.m., a national leader is awake, fully dressed, and moving through corridors that smell of metal and coffee. The security detail is too quiet. Their earpieces crackle with transmissions that sound like distant rain. A briefing happens at a sprint. There is no certainty, only probability. Cyber intrusion, EMP event. Possible decapitation strike. The leader hears the phrase nobody wants to say. Limited nuclear exchange possible. In the public, denial blooms instantly. People tell themselves it is a local blackout. They open apps that cannot load. They refresh, restart, and blame the phone. They do not yet blame the world. At 5:30 a.m., banks go dark. ATMs freeze with their screens locked on a logo that will never change again. Card readers beep once and then die. The invisible contract of money breaks in a single breath. Gas stations become monuments to a dead system. Pumps require power, and power requires grid stability, and grid stability requires coordination. Coordination requires communication. Communication is already bleeding out. By 6:10 a.m., the first crowd forms at a supermarket that cannot open. Automatic doors stay shut. People press on the glass as if pressure can restore electricity. Someone bangs with a fist, then laughs, then stops laughing. A manager tries to explain with calm words. Calm words do not move hungry bodies. A teenager climbs a cart corral to see down the street. He sees traffic jammed at dead lights, horns blaring like wounded animals. At 6:33 a.m., the first gunshot of the day cracks somewhere behind a strip mall. Nobody sees why. They only feel the way it changes the air. People stop looking at their phones and start looking at each other. The breakdown is not a single moment. It is a sequence of small betrayals by familiar objects. Water pressure drops as pumping stations fail. Toilets stop refilling. Faucets cough, then exhale brown air. At 7:05 a.m., cell towers overload, then fall one by one as backup batteries drain. Text messages sit unsent in outboxes like prayers. Without network time, devices drift. Even clocks begin to disagree. A shortwave radio becomes priceless. In one apartment, an older man twists a dial and hears a clipped voice reading emergency codes. The voice repeats numbers, then stops. The carrier tone lingers like a heartbeat. In government centers, a different set of radios continues. Leaders speak in hardened phrases. Continuity of government, martial authorization, rules of engagement. These words are not declarations. They are switches. At 7:40 a.m., jets scramble in patterns that do not show up on civilian apps anymore. Their contrails cut the morning sky, bright white scars above darkening cities. People point, record, then realize recording means nothing. Somewhere offshore, submarines rise to periscope depth and listen. They do not need internet. They need sonar, codes, and the discipline of men who have rehearsed the end of the world for decades. A missile does not look like a movie when it launches from the sea. It is a violent exhale, a column of steam, then a clean, accelerating dart. By the time anyone sees it, it is already gone. At 8:12 a.m., a limited strike hits a remote military relay site. The detonation is conventional, but the message is nuclear. It is a warning shot meant to be understood. The problem is that warnings are interpreted differently. One side sees restraint. The other sees the opening move of a ladder climb. Analysts watch trajectories and compare them to contingency plans. When reality matches a plan too closely, fear becomes logic. At 8:29 a.m., an emergency council meets in a room without windows. The table is heavy wood, but the air is heavier. The speaker says one sentence that changes everything. Article 5 discussions are active. Nobody cheers. Nobody relaxes. This is not unity. It is commitment or uncertainty. A commitment under uncertainty is exactly how wars become irreversible. The civilian world is now fully awake, but still blind. Without news feeds, people rely on the oldest system available, word of mouth. Word of mouth spreads faster than truth when fear is the fuel. By 9:10 a.m., the first wave of evacuation begins without official instruction. Families pack bags not because they know where to go, but because staying feels like waiting. Cars clog highways until engines idle hot. A mother keeps the window cracked to hear for sirens. She hears none. The absence feels personal, like abandonment. The child in the back seat asks if school is canceled. No one answers. At 9:44 a.m., a second EMP event ripples across another hemisphere. This one is stronger. Vehicles with modern engine control units stall on roads and never restart. Older trucks keep running, suddenly valuable as gold. This shift from civilized to primal happens in the parking lots. It happens at the last working gas pump. It happens at the last case of bottled water. Scarcity does not create evil. It reveals it. At 10:20 a.m., the first organized rationing line forms outside a municipal building. People stand shoulder to shoulder in cold patience. Then a rumor moves through the line like a virus. They're running out. A man steps out of line to cut ahead. Someone grabs his jacket. A shove becomes a punch. A punch becomes a stampede. Rationing collapses into grabbing, and grabbing collapses into violence. Inside hospitals, staff become triage machines. They stop thinking in names and start thinking in categories. Red tags, yellow tags, black tags. The hardest part is that the tags are not for war wounds yet. At 11:05 a.m., a city mayor speaks through a battery-powered megaphone on courthouse steps. The voice echoes off stone. The message is simple. Stay calm. Conserve water. Do not travel. Trust guidance. The crowd hears the words and believes none of them. Trust is a currency, and it has already been spent. People disperse, not organized, but in panicked vectors, each person trying to outrun an unseen map. The invisible threat grows thicker by noon. Not radiation yet for most. It is information poisoning. Someone claims they heard missiles hit the Capitol. Someone claims the military is coming to confiscate food. Information at this moment is poison disguised as clarity. That sentence becomes true in every living room. People cling to the most confident voice, not the most accurate one, because confidence feels like shelter. At 12:40 p.m., drones appear over a harbor, small and quiet, almost playful. Then they strike fuel depots with precision. Black smoke rises in columns, visible for miles, and the smell of burning petroleum crawls inland. Fire departments cannot reach the blaze. Hydrants have no pressure. Radios do not coordinate. Roads are choked with abandoned cars. The fire becomes a landmark, a sign that the world is now governed by physics alone. By 1:15 p.m., the macro response hardens. Retaliatory strikes hit command nodes, radar arrays, logistics hubs. The attacks are designed to blind and paralyze. They succeed, and that success terrifies both sides. Because blinding an enemy also blinds their ability to stop a mistake. When early warning is damaged, the temptation becomes preemption. Preemption becomes the fastest path to catastrophe. At 1:47 p.m., a national broadcast finally reaches some radios. It is short, distorted, and carefully worded. The leader confirms an ongoing strategic incident. The leader urges calm. The leader does not say war. The absence of the word is louder than the message. People hear what is missing and fill it with dread. In kitchens and cars, the phrase World War III becomes a whisper, then a chant. At 2:30 p.m., the first tactical nuclear detonation occurs far from major cities, but close enough to matter. It is limited, contained, strategic. Those adjectives do not change what it does to human minds. The flash is brighter than the sun. The shock wave arrives after, a rolling punch that shatters windows miles away. People who see it do not understand it at first. Their brains refuse the scale. Then the cloud rises and understanding arrives like nausea. The air tastes metallic. Dust drifts in slow, unnatural patterns. Birds fall from the sky without wounds. In the hours that follow, fallout becomes the quiet predator. It is carried by wind like invisible ash. It settles into gutters, onto playgrounds, into open wounds. It does not chase you. It waits. By 3:20 p.m., emergency orders become harsher. Roadblocks appear at key intersections, staffed by exhausted personnel with rifles and no clear instructions. They are there to control movement. Movement is now a threat. Crowds argue with the blockades. Some plead, some scream. Someone tries to drive through. A warning shot cracks. Tires pop. The car stops, and the driver's face becomes a mask of disbelief. At 4:05 p.m., night begins early, because smoke and dust dim the sky. Street lights do not come on. The city becomes a silhouette. In dark apartments, families light candles and suddenly realize how flammable modern life is. The first 12 hours end not with resolution, but with exhaustion. People stop moving because movement costs calories. They sit on floors because beds feel too soft for this kind of fear. But war does not pause when humans do. In secure rooms, calculations continue. Damage assessments. Second strike survivability. Command and control integrity. Every spreadsheet cell represents a city's heartbeat. At 5:30 p.m., submarines receive new coded messages. The crews do not debate morality. They execute protocol. The missiles on board are not anger. They are policy made physical. The hypersonic phase expands at dusk. Weapons that move faster than decisions. Trajectories that slice the atmosphere like knives. Defense systems track, predict, and fail because the math is too fast. In some places, air raid sirens finally begin, but they sound like relics. People do not know what they mean. They have never rehearsed this. Sirens are warnings for disasters with timelines. This has no timeline. At 7:10 p.m., the grid is still down. Refrigerators are warming. Freezers are sweating. Food begins to rot in slow motion. The smell of spoiled milk becomes part of the apocalypse's texture. In apartment towers, water stops completely. Toilets fill and cannot flush. The building becomes unlivable from the inside. Residents descend stairwells with buckets, then realize there is nowhere to carry them. By 8 p.m., the first organized looting wave hits commercial districts. Not because people are evil, but because hunger and fear are stronger than law. Police are overwhelmed or absent. The thin blue line dissolves into darkness. A storefront window shatters with a sound like liberation. Hands reach in. Someone cuts themselves and does not notice. A man carries out diapers like treasure. A woman carries out a television like a joke. At 9:30 p.m., the sky in one direction glows orange, not from sunset, but from burning industrial parks. The glow paints faces in flickering light. People watch as if watching means control. In rural areas, a different reality unfolds. Darkness is normal there. Wood stoves exist. Wells can be hand-pumped. Prepared families close gates and turn off lights because visibility is vulnerability. The new normal begins forming before day one ends. It is the separation between those with capability and those without. It is the rise of neighborhood watch groups with improvised authority. At 11:15 p.m., a rumor spreads about shelter locations. Thousands move toward a stadium because stadiums feel safe in the collective imagination. The gates are locked. The crowd presses. Someone falls. A crush begins, slow and merciless. People scream not at enemies, but at the unfairness of physics. In the end, the gate opens because someone inside fears being trapped with them. The first day's final minutes are not a cliffhanger. They are a weight, the kind that settles into bones. Somewhere a child asks if tomorrow will be normal again. The parent does not lie. The parent stays silent. Dawn of day 2 arrives at 4:55 a.m., with the gray light filtered through smoke. Birds are fewer. Traffic is absent. The world looks like it has aged a century overnight. The air carries the faint bite of chemical fires. In government, continuity plans activate. Backup leaders move to backup locations. Records are printed because paper survives. Satellites are blinded or destroyed in quiet orbital collisions. Navigation becomes guesswork again. Military units reposition for a war that is now everywhere and nowhere. The front line is not a border. It is an electrical diagram. It is an undersea cable. It is a cloud server farm turned into ash. By 7:30 a.m., potable water becomes the first true currency. People fill bathtubs, but it is too late for many. Those with water become targets. Those without become desperate. Desperation is contagious. At 9 a.m., health crises bloom in the shadows. Insulin spoils. Antibiotics are hoarded. Minor cuts become lethal infections. The modern miracle of medicine collapses into barter and prayer. At noon, a second nuclear exchange becomes possible, not because someone wants it, but because someone fears it. Fear of being struck first drives the impulse to strike first. This is the logic trap. In a high command room, a general looks at a map that no longer represents reality. Cities are markers, but people are not markers. The general speaks anyway, because the machine requires decisions. At 2:15 p.m., more detonations occur, scattered, strategic, limited. Each one expands the fallout zones, the panic zones, the zones where law ends. The wind changes, and invisible death changes direction with it.